Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Delaney. I'm 34 years old, I live in a suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio, and I genuinely never thought I would be sharing something this personal with strangers on the internet. I'm a pretty private person by nature. I don't post much, I don't air things out. I'm the kind of woman who has always believed that you handle your problems quietly, inside your own walls, because that's what you were raised to do. But here's the thing about staying quiet for too long. At some point, you stop staying quiet for dignity's sake, and you start staying quiet because you've forgotten you have a voice at all. And I need to tell you what happened, because I still can't fully believe it myself. I need to tell you about a Thanksgiving dinner that changed everything. I need to tell you what my husband said in front of his mother, his father, his sister, her husband, and 4 other adults sitting around a table that I helped pay for. I need to tell you what those words did to me, not in the moment, because in the moment I went very, very still, but later, alone in our bathroom, with the fan running so nobody could hear me, and then the next morning when I woke up before anyone else, and I opened my laptop and I pulled up a spreadsheet. I need to tell you what was in that spreadsheet, and I need to tell you what I decided to do with it, because what I'm about to share is not a story about screaming or throwing things or some dramatic blowout that ends with police at the door. This is a story about a woman who was invisible for 6 years, and about what happens when she decides, very calmly, to become even more invisible. Stay with me, because I promise you, the ending of this story is worth every single minute it takes to get there. I want to start at the beginning, because the beginning matters. You can't understand what happened at that dinner without understanding what the 6 years before it looked like. I met Daniel when I was 27. He was 30, he was tall, he had this easy confidence that I mistook for stability. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party in a bar on a Saturday night, and he asked for my number before I'd finished my first drink. I remember thinking, he knows what he wants. That felt attractive to me back then. I had spent most of my 20s around men who couldn't make decisions, who kept everything vague, who treated relationships like something they might get around to eventually. Daniel was nothing like that. Within 3 weeks of meeting me, he'd taken me to dinner twice, called me every night, and told me clearly that he was interested in something serious. I fell in love with his certainty before I fell in love with him, if I'm being completely honest with you right now. We dated for 2 years, we got engaged, we got married in a small ceremony with about 40 people, which was all we could comfortably afford at the time. I was 29, he was 32. I was freelancing as a graphic designer, building up my client base. He was an operations manager at a logistics company. Stable salary, decent benefits, modest but solid. We bought a house a year after the wedding, a 3-bedroom in a good school district, which mattered because we wanted kids eventually. The mortgage was in both our names. Daniel's salary was higher, so he took on the mortgage payment and his car note, a truck he'd bought before we married. I took on everything else. That's how we divided it at the beginning. Verbally. No spreadsheet, no contract, no formal agreement. Just, you do that, I'll handle this. Which seemed fine, seemed fair, seemed like a practical arrangement between 2 adults who were building a life together. And for the first year or 2, it genuinely was fine. I was building my freelance business, my income was growing, and I was proud of what I was contributing. I paid the electric bill, the gas bill, the water bill. I paid for our internet because I worked from home and I needed fast, reliable service. I paid for the streaming services. I paid the car insurance on the family SUV we'd bought together for road trips and eventually for kids. I handled the grocery subscription. We used one of those weekly meal kit deliveries for a while that I eventually replaced with a grocery store membership that gave us discounts. I paid for our gym memberships. I paid for the household supplies account I'd set up on an auto-ship service so we'd never run out of things like paper towels, cleaning supplies, laundry detergent. I bought the school supplies for our daughter Mia when she was born and started preschool. I paid for her extracurricular activities, her dance class, then her art class, then the summer reading program at the library that had an enrollment fee. I paid for our annual vet visits when we got the dog. I paid for our pest control service. I renewed our home warranty every year. I handled the Amazon Prime membership that we both used constantly. None of these things are small, not individually and certainly not together. But somehow, in the architecture of our household, Daniel had come to see the mortgage and his truck payment as the bills, and everything I paid had become invisible background noise, just things that existed, like the lights that came on when you flipped a switch. You don't think about the electricity, you just expect it to be there. That's what I had become in my own home, the electricity. I want to be careful not to paint Daniel as a monster, because the truth is more complicated than that, and I think you deserve the complicated truth. He wasn't cruel in the beginning. He wasn't dismissive in an obvious way. It happened gradually, the way these things always do, in small erosions so subtle you barely notice each one individually. It's only when you step back and look at the whole wall that you realize how much has been worn away. The first time I remember feeling it was about 1.5 years into the marriage. We were talking about taking a vacation, nothing extravagant, just a long weekend somewhere warm, maybe Florida. And I said we should be able to afford it if we saved a little over the next couple of months. And Daniel said, almost offhandedly, "Well, I mean, I'd have to make sure I have enough after the mortgage." Not, "We'd have to make sure," just him. I didn't say anything. I filed it away and told myself it was a turn of phrase. He didn't mean anything by it. But it kept happening. These little linguistic slips where I dissolved from the picture. I pay for this house. I handle the big stuff. Once, at a dinner with friends, someone asked how we manage the finances, and Daniel said with this casual, easy shrug, "I handle the financial side, Rachel does her thing." Her thing. My work, my income, my contributions, her thing. I remember laughing along with the table because what else do you do in that moment? You don't stop the dinner to correct your husband in front of 6 people. So you laugh and you take a sip of your wine and you feel something small and cold settle in your chest. And you don't name it yet because naming it would mean you'd have to deal with it. Over the years, the dismissiveness grew in proportion to his confidence. As his salary increased, he got promoted twice, he became increasingly comfortable positioning himself as the primary pillar of our household. He started making bigger decisions without fully consulting me. He decided we should redo the deck without really asking my opinion on timing or budget. He decided we should get a second dog, which was sweet, but also added to the vet bills I was paying, and framed it as his decision to make because, and I quote, "I pay for this house." I started saying things, small things. I'd mentioned the electric bill had gone up. I'd mentioned that Mia's dance class tuition was increasing in the spring. I'd mentioned that our home warranty renewal had come and I'd handled it. And he'd nod and say, "Okay," and go back to whatever he was watching. And those things would vanish from his awareness as quickly as I'd said them. He didn't see what I paid for. He genuinely, truly did not see it. And I made the mistake that a lot of women make in this situation. Instead of forcing him to see it, instead of sitting him down and laying out the numbers and saying, "Look at what I carry," I just kept carrying it, quietly. Because that's what I'd always done. Because confrontation felt harder than absorption. Because I kept telling myself it would get better. When things were less busy, when Mia was older, when we had more time to talk. There is always a reason to wait, and while you're waiting, the wait just gets heavier. Let me tell you specifically what was coming out of my accounts every single month. I want to be precise because this matters. This is the part that will make you understand everything that comes after. Every month, automatically, from my personal checking account or my credit card. The electric bill, averaging $180 a month, higher in summer with the AC, higher in winter with the heat. Daniel had no idea what we paid. He had never once opened an electric bill in 6 years of marriage. The gas bill, averaging $60 in non-winter months, over $150 in January and February. The water and sewer bill, $48 a month, billed quarterly, which I paid every 3 months without mention. Our internet, $112 a month for the high-speed service I needed for client video calls and large file transfers. Daniel used this internet constantly for gaming, for streaming, for working from home on the rare days he did. He did not know what it cost. 3 streaming services we both used, Netflix, Hulu, and one other. Together, about $45 a month. Car insurance on the family SUV, $167 per month. Daniel's truck was insured through his company's fleet discount, a benefit of his job. The SUV was mine to insure. Grocery subscription and household auto ship, between $200 and $250 per month combined. This covered everything from our meal supplements to paper towels to the dog food that arrived every 4 weeks at the door. Mia's extracurricular activities. At the time of that dinner, she was in both an art class and a gymnastics beginner program. Together, $190 per month. The dog's routine vet care, heartworm prevention, flea prevention, averaged out to about $60 per month when you broke down the annual costs. Our gym memberships, $80 total for both of us per month. Daniel went to the gym maybe once every 3 weeks. I went 4 times a week. Home warranty renewal, $625 per year, which I broke into a monthly mental accounting of about $52. Amazon Prime, $139 annually, about $12 a month. Pest control, $120 every quarter, about $40 a month. Mia's school supplies, seasonal clothing top-ups, birthday party gifts for her classmates, school fundraiser payments. Let's conservatively say another $80 to $100 per month, averaged over the year. I also paid our health insurance premiums through my freelance income. Daniel's employer covered his, but Mia and I were on my plan, which ran $240 per month. Are you doing the math? Because I was. I had been doing it quietly in my head for years. Without my contributions, our monthly household expenses didn't just dip slightly, they collapsed. The number on my spreadsheet that night, after Thanksgiving, was $1,562 per month in recurring bills that existed solely because I paid them. Plus irregular expenses that brought my real monthly contribution to well over $2,000. On top of a mortgage I was equally on the hook for legally, even if Daniel wrote the check. $2,000 a month, invisible, unacknowledged, contributing nothing. The year before Thanksgiving was the hardest. Something shifted in Daniel in a way I struggled to identify at the time, but can see clearly now. His sister Laura had married a man named Greg who made very good money, genuinely good money, the kind that allowed them to take 2 international trips a year and renovate their entire kitchen in cash. And Daniel had developed a habit of referencing Greg and Laura's life in ways that were designed to make subtle points. Greg doesn't have Laura worry about bills, he just handles everything. She focuses on the kids and herself. I'd look at him. I have a career, Daniel. I know, I'm just saying there's something nice about that kind of setup. Or he'd say things like, my mom never had to stress about money stuff when we were growing up. Dad just took care of it. As if I was stressing about money stuff. As if I was some anxious bother, rather than the person quietly making sure the lights stayed on, and the children's tuition was paid, and the refrigerator stocked itself through subscription every week. I remember one evening in particular. This was about 8 months before Thanksgiving, so still well within the year that things were visibly deteriorating. When Daniel came home from dinner at his parents' house, having had a conversation that clearly sat with him. He didn't say anything until we were getting ready for bed, and then he said, out of nowhere, "My mom asked how we're doing financially. She seems worried." I asked what he had told her, and he said, "I told her I handle it, that I keep everything stable." I stood there brushing my teeth and looking at myself in the mirror, and I thought, you told her you handle it, not we, you. And I made this face in the mirror, not angry, not sad, just this slow recognition, and I rinsed my mouth and turned off the bathroom light and got into bed and didn't say anything about it. Because by then I had gotten very good at not saying anything about it. That was the skill I had refined to perfection over 6 years. The art of swallowing what was true and smiling with the smooth face of someone who is completely fine. His mother, Patricia, and I say this with all the restraint I can manage, had never liked me. She'd never disliked me openly either, which would have been easier to handle. She existed in that particular mother-in-law space of polite condescension. She asked me about my little design work the way someone might ask about a hobby. She once said in my presence that she worried Daniel did too much around the house, given how much he worked. He didn't do much around the house, but pointing that out felt like an invitation to a fight I wasn't ready to have. I want you to understand the climate in which that Thanksgiving happened. Because it wasn't a single moment. It was 6 years of accumulated erosion arriving at one dinner table. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, Daniel and I had a disagreement about money. Not a fight. We rarely had full fights. More of a pressured conversation that ended unresolved. He'd mentioned, casually, that he wanted to look into refinancing the mortgage. Fine, totally reasonable. But then he'd said, "I'm going to talk to a financial advisor, see what makes sense." "Should we do that together?" I asked. "I mean, it's the mortgage. I handle the mortgage." "It's in both our names, Daniel." He'd looked at me with this expression I'd come to know well, slightly impatient, slightly bewildered, as if I'd said something unnecessarily complicated. "Yeah, but you don't really deal with the financial stuff, Rachel." "I deal with a lot of financial stuff," I said quietly. "Babe, the mortgage is the big thing. I'll let you know what the advisor says." And that was the end of it. He went back to his phone, and I stood in the kitchen holding the dish towel I'd been folding, and I felt that cold thing in my chest that I'd been feeling for years. Only this time, it felt less like cold, and more like something hardening, solidifying. I almost said something more that night. I almost pulled out my phone and showed him my bank statements. But I didn't. I told myself we'd talk after the holidays, when things were calmer. 2 days later, we were at his parents' house for Thanksgiving. There were 12 of us around the table. Patricia and Frank, Daniel's parents, Laura and Greg, Daniel's college friend Tom and his fiancée Amanda, who'd been invited because they were in town. 2 of Patricia's friends from her church group. Our daughter Mia, 5 years old, who had already eaten and was watching something on an iPad in the living room. And me. The food was good. The wine was flowing. Things had been easy and warm for the first hour and a half, the comfortable noise of a family holiday, and I had been genuinely relaxed in a way I hadn't been in months. I was talking to Amanda about her wedding planning when the conversation at the other end of the table shifted. I caught Daniel's voice first. He was talking to Greg, loud and loose from the wine, laughing about something. And then Greg said something about finances. I caught the word investments, and Daniel nodded and said something that made the whole table turn. "Yeah, man, I basically run everything on our end. I handle the house, the cars, the big stuff. I don't mind it. Rachel does her thing with her freelance work, which is great." He paused, and in that pause there was something, a hesitation that should have been humility, but instead became the opposite. "But honestly, in terms of the household, she contributes nothing financially. I'm the one keeping everything going." The table didn't go silent exactly, but the register shifted. I felt it the way you feel a temperature drop. Patricia smiled. That small, contained smile that lives just at the corners of the mouth. Tom looked down at his plate. Amanda, who had been mid-sentence to me, stopped talking. I looked at Daniel. He was still looking at Greg. He hadn't even glanced my way. He said it like it was an unremarkable fact, like he was mentioning the weather. I did not explode. I want to be very clear about this. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I did not throw a dinner roll. I reached for my wine glass and I took a slow sip, and I set it back down and I said in a perfectly measured voice, "That's interesting." Daniel looked over at me then. Something flickered on his face, a quick read of the room, a slight recalibration. "I just meant, I handled the heavy lifting." "I heard what you meant," I said. Patricia jumped in with something about the sweet potato casserole, and the moment was papered over the way family moments always are, with food and noise and someone changing the subject. Laura gave me a look across the table. Not a sympathetic one, more of a curious one, like she was watching something interesting unfold. I smiled for the rest of the dinner. I helped clear the table. I played with Mia in the living room for 40 minutes. I said goodbye to everyone warmly. I got in the car. I watched Daniel drive. I looked at the passing streetlights, orange and even. He tried once in the car. "Hey, I didn't mean anything bad back there." "I know," I said. "I was just talking guy stuff with Greg." "I know," I said again. He took my agreement as absolution and turned the radio on. He was asleep by 11. I lay next to him in the dark, completely awake, and I thought about a spreadsheet. I thought about a number. I thought about 6 years of electric bills and car insurance and gym memberships and vet visits and school tuition. I thought about the word nothing. I thought, let me show you nothing. I got up at 2 in the morning and I went to the kitchen and I sat at the table in the dark for a long time before I turned on the light. I want to tell you what those hours felt like because I think it matters. Because you might think this is a story of righteous anger, and it partly is, but first it was grief. It was the particular grief of realizing that someone you love has been looking at you and not seeing you for a very long time, and you let it happen. You participated in your own invisibility. You made it easy for him to not see you by never demanding to be seen. I thought about every conversation where I'd started to speak and then stopped. Every bill I'd paid without mentioning it. Every time I'd thought, he's just tired, he's just stressed, he doesn't mean it that way. I thought about how I'd told myself for years that the arrangement was working, that what I did was valuable, that I didn't need acknowledgement because I knew my own worth. That's such a comfortable lie, and I had been telling it to myself so fluently for so long. He contributes nothing. His exact words in front of 12 people, with that easy, wineful confidence, like it was so obvious it barely needed saying. I thought about every time I had muted myself, the time I almost brought up the electric bill at dinner and then thought, no, this isn't the right moment, he's stressed about work. The time I nearly forwarded him a car insurance renewal email with a note saying, FYI, we pay this, and then deleted the draft because it felt petty. The time I sat down one evening to have a real conversation about how I felt unseen, and he fell asleep on the couch before I could start, and I convinced myself it was a sign to wait. I had waited through so many falling asleep moments, So many not right now moments. So many we'll talk about this later moments. 6 years of later, and he had floated through all of them, completely unbothered, comfortable in the fiction he'd constructed. Because I had never once disturbed the fiction. I had actually protected it. I had been so careful about not making him feel bad that I had made it extraordinarily easy for him to not see me at all. I cried in the kitchen for maybe 20 minutes, the good, ugly kind of crying that's actually more like releasing pressure than expressing sadness. Then I dried my face with a dish towel, and I got my laptop and I opened a new spreadsheet. At the top I typed, "What I actually pay for," and I started writing. Everything. Every line item, every amount, every account, every autopay. I sat there until 4 in the morning. I had a cup of tea. The house was completely quiet except for the refrigerator humming, a refrigerator full of groceries from the membership I paid for, and outside the neighbor's dog barked twice and then stopped. When I was done, I looked at the total column at the bottom of the spreadsheet. I looked at it for a long time. Then I opened a new tab and I started thinking about what would happen if those numbers went to 0. Not in a reckless way, not in a way designed to hurt our daughter or destabilize our home. In a very calm, very deliberate, very methodical way. What would happen if Daniel got to experience this household without the invisible infrastructure I had built and maintained for 6 years? What would actually break? And when? I went to bed at 4:30. I slept better than I had in months. I spent the following week doing something I should have done years earlier. I did research. I looked at each bill and each service, and I asked myself 2 questions. 1. Is this essential to Mia's well-being or safety? 2. Is this essential to my income or my professional function? If the answer to either was yes, I kept it. I would never compromise Mia's stability as part of this. She is 5 years old and she is the center of my world and she stays untouched. So Mia's dance class, I kept that. Her art class, kept. Her school supplies, kept. Her doctor, her dentist, her extracurriculars, her clothes, her everything. The health insurance I carried for her, obviously kept. Her portion of the grocery and household auto ship, kept. The things that served Daniel specifically or served us both jointly in ways that he'd never acknowledged or contributed to, those were different. I made a list. The internet. Daniel used it just as much as I did. More most evenings, between gaming and streaming. It ran through my account. If I cancelled it, he would notice. But I wasn't going to cancel it. I was going to transfer the account into his name. He'd have to set up his own payment. Same service, same cable, different bill payer. The streaming services, all 3. I was going to remove my payment method from all of them. If Daniel wanted to keep them, he would need to enter his own card. If he didn't notice until they stopped working, well, that would be information. Car insurance on the SUV. This was a big one and I handled it carefully. I contacted our insurance agent and split our policy. I kept myself insured on my own policy. I removed Daniel's access to the SUV's coverage and set up a separate policy for just my vehicle use. I documented every step of this, thoroughly, to ensure full legal compliance. I wasn't going to leave my daughter riding in an uninsured vehicle. I was going to make sure the insurance for the vehicle I primarily drove was on a policy Daniel would need to set up for himself if he wanted to use it. The gym memberships. I cancelled Daniel's, I kept mine. If he wanted to go to the gym, which, again, happened about twice a month on average, he could pay for his own. The home warranty renewal was coming up in January. I simply did not renew it. If something in the house broke and Daniel wanted a warranty service call, he'd find there was no active policy. I took note of this and set a reminder to reevaluate in spring. The Amazon Prime membership. I removed Daniel's profile from the account and cancelled shared family access. He'd stopped paying for anything on it anyway. It was mine. I kept it for my shipping needs. His access was over. The pest control service. Cancelled from my account. If Daniel wanted quarterly pest treatment, he was welcome to call the company and set it up himself. The household auto-ship for supplies. I narrowed the subscription to cover only the items Mia and I specifically used, removed the dog supplies that were Daniel's domain since he'd chosen to get the second dog, and recalculated the order. My cost went down. His awareness of how this had worked would either rise or the house would gradually start running out of things. Finally, and this one took me the longest to decide on, I stopped quietly absorbing the household's miscellaneous expenses, the birthday gifts for family events on Daniel's side, the random household items he'd ask me to grab on my way home, the cost of his parents' Christmas gift, which I had quietly handled every year since we'd married. I handled all of this over the course of 8 days, very quietly. I did not announce it. I did not leave a note. I did not send a spreadsheet. I simply, calmly, removed myself from everything that Daniel had never seen. And then I waited. Before I tell you what happened next, I know some of you are already thinking about whether this was the right thing to do. And honestly, if you've ever been in a situation where you felt completely unseen by the person who was supposed to know you best, I think you already understand why I made these choices. Drop a comment below and tell me, because I genuinely want to know, did I go too far? At the time, I was so certain. Later, I wasn't always sure. But let me tell you what happened. The first thing to go was the streaming. About 10 days after Thanksgiving, Daniel sat down on the couch in the evening, turned on the television, tried to open Netflix, and found his account was asking for payment details. He called out to me from the living room. "Babe, Netflix is doing something weird." I said from the kitchen, where I was doing Mia's bath prep. "It's asking for a credit card." "Okay." A pause. "Did our subscription lapse?" I didn't answer right away, not to be cruel, but because Mia was talking to me about something she'd made at school, and I was listening to her. When I came back to the living room doorway, Daniel was holding the remote, looking mildly annoyed. "What's going on with Netflix?" he said. "The payment method is no longer active on that account," I said pleasantly. "What? Why?" "I removed it." He stared at me. "Why?" "I reorganized some of my automatic payments. That account was linked to my card. I've taken it off." "So who pays for it now?" I looked at him, calmly, with all the patience in the world. "That's a good question, Daniel." He blinked. Then he sighed the way men sigh when they find something mildly inconvenient, pulled out his own wallet, and entered his debit card number into the Netflix prompt. Problem solved, in his mind. He sat back and resumed watching. I went back to the bathroom. I gave Mia her bath. I read her 2 books. I tucked her in. I came back to the living room and sat in the armchair and folded laundry, while Daniel watched television, and I thought, that's one. A week later, he tried to use Hulu on his laptop. Same thing, payment lapsed. This time he was slightly more irritated. He came to me while I was working. "Rachel, what's going on with the streaming services? First Netflix, now Hulu is cancelled." "It's not cancelled," I said, not looking up from my screen. "It just needs a payment method." "But these were working before. Why did you change everything?" I looked at him then. "I reorganized my budget, Daniel. I took some things off my account, things that weren't originally my responsibility." Something moved in his face, not quite understanding, more like the beginning of awareness, not yet processed, not yet fully conscious. He looked at me for a moment, then took out his phone and resubscribed to Hulu on his own card. He did the same for the 3rd streaming service 2 days later when it lapsed, without saying anything to me about it at all. The gym membership notice came in an email around the third week. He saw it on his phone. His membership had been cancelled. He came to me. "Did you cancel my gym membership?" "I reorganized what I was paying for," I said again. "Rachel," his voice had a new edge, "what is happening?" "I'm just managing my own expenses more carefully." "We share expenses." I put down what I was doing and looked at him directly. "Do we?" He held my gaze. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said evenly, "that I've been thinking about our conversation at Thanksgiving, about what you said. I told you I didn't mean anything by that." "I know," I said, "but it made me think about what I'm actually paying for, and I decided to reassess." He stared at me. Then he walked away. He didn't resubscribe to the gym. He just stopped going, which, as I mentioned, wasn't much of a change. By the end of month 1, he'd noticed the streaming services. He'd noticed the gym. He had not yet noticed the car insurance, the home warranty, or the household auto-ship changes, because those were not things he'd ever paid attention to, but those were coming. Daniel's response to all of this was not anger at first. It was something more like confused displeasure, the response of a person who has had something functioning in the background of their life suddenly become visible, and who doesn't entirely understand why, and who is mildly put out by the inconvenience of it. He tried various approaches over the following days. First, he tried warmth. He was more attentive for a few days, asking about my work, noticing when I seemed tired, making the coffee one morning and bringing me a cup at my desk. I appreciated this. I genuinely did. I am not the kind of person who is immune to kindness. But I also noticed that the warmth was applied entirely to surface symptoms. He did not ask me what I was paying for. He did not ask to look at a budget together. He did not say, "Rachel, I realize I don't have a clear picture of our finances and I want to fix that." He just tried to turn the temperature back up in the room and hoped the underlying problem would defrost on its own. When that didn't visibly change my approach, he tried a kind of casual territorial assertion, mentioning frequently and casually what he handled. The mortgage, the truck payment, keeping the roof over us. It was more frequent than usual, these references, like he was preparing an argument. Then, about 5 weeks in, the Amazon Prime Access issue surfaced. He tried to order something and found he'd been removed from the household account. "I'm not on Prime anymore," he said. "No," I agreed. "Can you add me back?" "You can create your own account," I said, "or you can subscribe." He looked at me for a long time. "How much is it?" I told him the annual price. He said nothing for a moment. Then, "How long have you been paying for that?" 6 years, I said. He said, "Huh," and walked away. He did not create his own account. He started asking me to order things for him through mine, which I did for items for Mia and declined for items for himself. The car insurance revelation hit a few days later. He'd borrowed the SUV, his truck was in for service, and when he went to check on the insurance details out of paranoia, because he'd had a minor fender bender years earlier and it had made him cautious about having documentation in the car, he found the name on the policy had changed. He came to me with his phone, showing me the insurance app I'd been on, now showing as single driver. "What happened to the insurance?" "I adjusted the policy," I said. "The SUV is primarily mine. I restructured the coverage." "What does that mean for me if I drive it?" "You would need to be added to a policy, your own policy, or you could be added to mine." "And how much does that cost?" "Would you like me to get a quote?" He looked at me, and this time the look was different. This time something behind his eyes was doing actual calculation. Not anger, not yet. Something more like realization arriving in stages, like daylight coming slowly. "Rachel," he said carefully, "What exactly were you paying for before?" And I said, "Would you like to see a spreadsheet?" I didn't show him the spreadsheet that day. He wasn't ready to receive it, and I wasn't ready to offer it. What I said was, "When you want to have that conversation, I'm here. I've always been here." He didn't push. He went quiet for a few days, which was unusual for him. He was processing something. I could feel it in the house, this recalibration happening behind his forehead while he made dinner some nights and scrolled through his phone and drove Mia to preschool on the days he could. Then the pest control came up. A service van showed up at our door in week 7, the quarterly visit. Daniel happened to be working from home that day. He answered the door, spoke to the technician, and came to find me afterward. They said our service was cancelled, that we'd have to set up a new account. "Yes," I said, "I cancelled it." "Why?" "I was reassessing what I pay for." "Rachel," his voice was tight now. Not explosive, Daniel rarely got explosive, but tight, controlled in the way that precedes something. "Can you just tell me what's going on? What bills are you still paying and what have you stopped?" I closed my laptop. I looked at him. I said, "The bills I'm still paying are the ones that are mine, or that affect Mia directly. Everything else I've stepped back from." "What does everything else mean?" "It means the internet, which is now in your name, by the way. You'll be getting a bill. The streaming services you've resubscribed to, the gym membership, the pest control, the home warranty which is up for renewal in January, the Amazon account, your portion of the household supplies auto ship, and the car insurance restructuring I mentioned." He stared at me. "The internet? When did you switch the internet to my name?" 3 weeks ago. The bill should be arriving soon if it hasn't already." He sat down, slowly, like the sitting down was involuntary. He sat on the edge of the couch and he looked at the floor. "How much?" he said quietly. "How much was all of that, every month?" And now I opened my laptop, and I turned it to face him, and I showed him the spreadsheet. He looked at it for a long time without speaking. I watched his face move through several things, discomfort first, then something approaching shock, not at any individual line, but at the accumulation, the way it added up, the total at the bottom. His eyes moved down to it and stayed there. $1,562 in recurring bills, I said, plus irregular expenses. My real monthly contribution to this household has been between $200 and $2,300 a month, every month for 6 years. While you've been telling people I contribute nothing." He looked up at me. "I wasn't trying to—" "I know," I said. "I know you weren't trying to be malicious, but Daniel, you believed it. You genuinely believed it. You said it at your parents' Thanksgiving table in front of 12 people with complete confidence, because it was true in your head. And I have to ask you how that happened, because I've been here. I've been paying these things. I've been doing this every single month. How did you not know?" He didn't have an answer, and that, in many ways, was the most devastating thing about the whole moment. Not the anger, not the defensiveness, just the absence of a good answer. I should have known Patricia would find a way into this. I don't know how she found out, whether Daniel called her or whether Laura mentioned something, or whether Daniel went to his parents' house one afternoon while I was working and said more than he intended. But approximately 10 days after the spreadsheet conversation, Patricia called me. I almost didn't pick up. I'm glad I did. "Rachel," she said, in that particular tone she used when she was being warm and pointed at the same time. "I've been thinking about you. I've been worried about you too." "We're fine, Patricia. Daniel mentioned you've been making some changes around the house, with the finances." A pause. "I hope everything is okay." "Everything is clarifying," I said. Another pause. "I hope you're not letting pride get in the way of working things out." I've been married 37 years, and I'll tell you, Rachel, There are times you have to let things go for the sake of the family. I breathed slowly. What exactly am I supposed to let go of, Patricia? Well, she softened slightly, whatever grievance you're holding from Thanksgiving. Daniel didn't mean anything. He talks without thinking. He's always been that way. Patricia, I said, your son told a table full of people that I contribute nothing to our marriage. Financially, nothing. Do you understand how much money I put into this household every single month? Silence. I didn't realize, she started. Nobody realized, I said. That's the point. Nobody realized because I never made a show of it. I just did it. Every month for 6 years. And your son has been telling people, including himself, that he handles everything, that I just do my little freelance thing. So now I've stopped doing some of those things, and now he knows what they cost. That's all that's happening. Patricia was very quiet for a moment. Well, she said finally, I see. I hope so, I said. She didn't call me again for 2 weeks. What happened next, I did not engineer. I want to be clear about this. I didn't go to anyone and present my case. I didn't send a spreadsheet to the family group chat. I didn't call Laura or Tom or Amanda and do a PR campaign on myself. I genuinely believe that when the truth is big enough, it finds its own way out. Daniel told his sister. He called Laura, I think, probably to vent or to get some perspective, and he made the mistake of telling her the full number from the spreadsheet. Laura, who is a sharp woman even if I've never been close to her, apparently said something along the lines of, Daniel, she was paying $1,500 a month on top of her share of the mortgage, and you told people she contributes nothing? I don't know exactly what he said in response, but I do know that Laura called me the following afternoon and said, I owe you an apology for what I said at Thanksgiving. You didn't say anything, I said. No, she said quietly. That's the apology. And I understood her completely, because the people at that table who'd stayed silent while Daniel said those words, their silence had been its own kind of statement, and Laura knew that. Tom, Daniel's college friend who'd been there that night, must have heard something through the grapevine, because he texted Daniel something that Daniel showed me later, with a complicated expression on his face. Tom had written, Bro, I've been thinking about what you said about Rachel at Thanksgiving. That was a crappy thing to say in front of everyone. Hope you guys are working it out. The circle of awareness was widening, and Daniel was standing in the center of it, understanding for the first time what it felt like to be seen clearly and not to like the image. It was a Saturday afternoon in early January. Mia was at her grandmother's, my mother's, not Patricia's. The house was quiet. Daniel came to find me in my home office, where I was finishing a client project, and he stood in the doorway and said, Can we talk? Not about the bills, about everything. I saved my file. I turned my chair. I said, Yes. He came and sat across from me, in the chair that was usually stacked with client proofs, and he looked at his hands for a moment before he looked at me. I've been thinking, he said, about how this happened, how I got to a place where I actually believed what I said at Thanksgiving, and I've been really uncomfortable with the answer. I waited. I think, he paused, started again. I think I made myself the hero of a story that was a lot more complicated than I let myself see. I knew, somewhere, that you paid things. I categorized them as small, as not the real stuff. And I never examined why I did that. I just did. You did, I said. And I've been defensive about it for the past 2 months, because looking at it directly it's humiliating. Not in a public way, in a private way. The private kind that's actually worse. He rubbed the back of his neck. I said something horrible, in public, about my wife, about a woman who has been holding up half this house for 6 years and never once made me feel bad about it, and I didn't even know enough to know what I didn't know. I sat with that for a moment. It was, I will tell you honestly, more than I had expected him to say, more than I had let myself hope for. "What do you want to do about it?" I asked. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to sit down, together, with every number on the table. The mortgage, my truck, the things you've been paying, all of it. I want to actually understand our finances, for the first time. And I want to figure out how we divide things going forward in a way that's actually fair and documented." "And the other thing," I said. He met my eyes. "Yeah. I need you to understand that what you took from me was not just recognition, it was my dignity. In front of your family, in front of people who will always remember that moment, whether they mention it or not. You named me as nothing. And I need you to understand the weight of that." He looked like it cost him something to hold my gaze, but he held it. "I know," he said. "I don't know how to fix that. I don't think there's a quick fix for it. But I want to try if you let me." I thought about sitting in the kitchen at 2 in the morning with a cup of tea and a spreadsheet. I thought about the electric bill, about 6 years of electric bills in the dark. I thought about Mia sleeping down the hall, about the life I'd built inside these walls as much as he had, about what I owed myself and what I owed my daughter, and what, if anything, I owed this marriage. "We start over," I said, "on equal terms, everything on the table, everything split consciously, not invisibly, every contribution named." "Yes," he said. "And you call your mother, and you tell Tom, not to perform humility, but because you made a statement publicly and it needs to be corrected. People remember what was said. They deserve to know you know it was wrong." He breathed in. "Okay, and one more thing," I said. He waited. "The next time someone asks about our finances at a dinner table, we say we, not I, we." He nodded slowly. We. We spent the next 3 weekends doing exactly what he'd proposed. Budget sessions at the kitchen table with both our laptops open, every number visible, every account named. His salary, my freelance income, the mortgage, every bill, every subscription, every irregular expense. We built a shared spreadsheet together, the irony of which was not lost on me, and divided everything fairly. Not 50-50 exactly, because our incomes weren't identical, but proportionally. And we set up a joint account for the first time in our marriage, a household operating account that both of us contributed to on the same day every month, and that paid every household bill without it being invisibly absorbed by one person. It sounds simple. It is simple. But simple things are the ones that destroy marriages when they're left unexamined. The budget sessions weren't particularly emotional. They were mostly just functional. But somewhere inside the function there was something else. The act of actually looking at each other's contributions and naming them out loud. Daniel saying unprompted, "I didn't realize the car insurance was this much." And me saying, "It's been that much for 4 years." And him nodding and writing it down. Being seen, even in a spreadsheet, even in numbers, being seen. Daniel did call his mother. He told me about it afterward. A conversation that was apparently awkward and honest in equal measure, in which he told her he'd been wrong about what he'd said, and that he wanted her to know that. Patricia, according to him, said she already knew. That she'd had a very clarifying conversation with me back in December, and that she thought I was, and this was the word he said she used, formidable. I don't know how to feel about being called formidable by my mother-in-law. I'm choosing to take it as a compliment. He texted Tom as well, a longer message than Tom's original text, and Tom apparently responded by saying Daniel was a good man for recognizing it, which I thought was generous but appreciated. Laura and I had coffee in early February. It was the warmest conversation she and I had ever had. She told me she'd always thought I was underestimated. I told her I'd underestimated myself, which was maybe the more important problem. My daughter Mia, age 5, is blissfully unaware of any of this. She goes to dance class, she goes to art class, she comes home covered in paint and chalk and joy. She is the reason I stayed. She is the reason I fought for the version of this marriage that tells her, in this house, everyone's contribution is seen. It's been almost 5 months since that Thanksgiving dinner. I'm not going to tell you that everything is perfect, because you deserve the truth more than you deserve a tidy bow. Marriage doesn't get fixed in a budget meeting. The trust that was quietly eroded over 6 years doesn't fully rebuild in 5 months. There are still moments when I feel the old invisibility trying to creep back in, when Daniel speaks over me in a conversation, when he makes an assumption without asking, when I catch myself thinking, should I just handle this quietly? And then I remember what quiet handling costs. I remember the kitchen at 2 a.m. I remember what nothing felt like when it was aimed at me by someone who was supposed to know me. I don't let the silence win anymore. I speak up when something feels off. I say, I need to talk about this. I say, I want to understand where you're coming from, and I want you to understand me. I say, that's not accurate. Let me tell you what's accurate. Small sentences, simple sentences, sentences I should have been saying for years. I kept the spreadsheet, the original one, the one I made at 2 a.m. with my tea. It lives in a folder on my desktop, labeled with nothing remarkable, just a date. I open it occasionally, not out of bitterness, out of something closer to respect for the woman who sat in that dark kitchen and decided, very quietly, that invisible was not the same as worthless. You can be unseen for a very long time without that meaning you are not there. You can carry things without anyone watching, and those things can be real and heavy and essential. The fact that someone doesn't see what you carry doesn't mean you're not carrying it. What I did, stopping those bills, that quiet, methodical, invisible revolt, was not graceful. It was not the most direct path. If I could go back and tell my earlier self something, I'd probably say, show him the spreadsheet sooner. Make the invisible visible before you have to make it disappear. Force the conversation instead of waiting for the crisis. But we don't always learn our worth at the convenient moment. Sometimes we learn it at a Thanksgiving table, in front of 12 people, when someone who is supposed to love us uses the word nothing, and something inside us goes completely, dangerously still. If that's happened to you, if you've been someone's background electricity, powering a home they barely noticed, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not nothing. You have never been nothing. And the moment you know that with your whole body is the moment everything starts to change. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story resonated with you, if you've been carrying something invisible, if someone has ever made you feel like you contribute less than you do, I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me what you are carrying. Tell me when you finally stopped staying quiet. This is a space for exactly that kind of story. And if you know someone who needs to hear this right now, a friend, a sister, anyone, share this video. Because some people need to know they're not alone before they can figure out what comes next. I'll see you in the next one.